Okay, so we have a few more people still to join, but I think we will make a start because we want to make sure that we keep to time. We very much appreciate you all giving us your time this morning. So welcome everyone to the launch of SFHA's new strategy, Shaping Our Futures Together. It's fantastic to see such a brilliant turnout this morning, and I'm delighted personally to be able to host this event. My name's Carolyn Lockhead. I have recently joined SFHA as the Director of Public Affairs and Communications. I think I'm now in my 5th week in post. So I've met a few of you already. I have lots more people still to meet, and I'm very much looking forward to doing so. But fantastic opportunity, certainly from my point of view, to hear from as many people as possible this morning, hear from Sally and the Cabinet Secretary, and learn more about the issues. So I am personally delighted to be here, and I very much hope that you all get something out of this morning's session. So really delighted that you can all join us. As I've said this morning, I'm delighted to be joined by SFHA's Chief Executive, Sally Thomas, who will be talking through our new strategy, and our guest speaker, the Cabinet Secretary for Social Justice, Housing and Local Government, Shona Robeson. I have a few bits of housekeeping to go through. If this were a real event, I'd be telling you things like where the loos are, where the tea and coffee is. I can't help you with that. You're going to have to sort that out yourself this morning. But what I can tell you is that we're scheduled to have just about an hour together today, so we will finish around about 12. Just a reminder to please mute yourself when you're not speaking. We are recording this session, so it will be available on our YouTube channel afterwards. If anyone is not happy with that, that's completely fine. Just switch your camera off, as some people have, and then you won't feature in the video. So in terms of our agenda this morning, we'll hear an overview of the strategy from Sally. We'll then hear from the Cabinet Secretary, and we'll move on to a Q&A session. We'd really like that to be interactive as much as possible. So please do feel free, while our speakers are speaking, to put questions or observations in the chat throughout the session. You can do that using the chat facility. That's the little speech bubble icon on the top ribbon of your screen. Once we've heard from both our speakers, I will put questions to Sally and to the Cabinet Secretary. If you would like to put your question personally, so to come off mute and actually ask your question, I really hope we'll have time for that. So maybe just indicate when you post your question, if you would like to do that. And if there's time, I will come to you and say, would you like to ask your question? If we get a bit short of time, then I'll just ask the question, but we'll see how we go. It would be lovely to hear from people. You can also use the chat function if you're having any technical difficulties. Just post a note and our brilliant SFHA team will do their very best to help you. I think the last point from me is just to note that the strategy is now available on our website, so you can go and have a look in the news section and you'll find it there. And it will also be sent out to members later on today. So do please have a look and let us know your thoughts. So I think that is everything that I need to say. I am going to pass over to our Chief Exec, Sally Thomas, who is going to take us through the new strategy. Sally.
Thanks, Carolyn. And yeah, welcome everyone today. Great to see all of you and so many of you as well. And I'm thinking, as Carolyn said, there'll be more joining as we go. So hopefully that won't be too off-putting. I'm just going to say a few words by way of introduction about our strategy. And then I'm going to hand over to the Cabinet Secretary, who's the person that you really want to hear from today, I think. And then it'd be great to have some discussion and questions and answers to hear from you in terms of your thoughts and concerns and ideas. And I'm going to be, my teleprompter just didn't play ball this morning, so I'm going to be looking at some pages I've got left. So if I keep swiveling my eyes, that's why. So bear with me for that. Yes, I'm delighted to be launching our new strategy this morning, Shaping Our Futures Together. It's a 3-year strategy that sets out how SFHA will work with, help, support its members to deliver for the benefit of tenants, communities and customers in a post-pandemic Scotland. And I'd also like to thank the Cabinet Secretary for being with us this morning. I'll talk more about her new portfolio later on, but incredibly busy, lots going on. So really delighted she was able to make time to join us this morning. SFHA works for and with, as you know, an incredibly diverse sector. Scotland is very fortunate in having such diversity in its sector. We represent over 92% of it and growing. And our members are crucial to society, to the economy, to the environment, to the culture of Scotland. And never has this been more apparent than in the last year. So our role, your role, has become even more important than it ever has been, if that's possible, but also more challenging than ever. Our role is to support and represent you, to do the work that you do so well. And during the pandemic, that's been even more challenging and difficult than usual. And we had to work at speed to adapt our membership offers, our activity and ways of working. So the sector could do even more of what it does best. Not only working alongside tenants and communities to provide great homes in great places, but at the same time protect them from the worst ravages of COVID. So we developed this 3-year strategy on the back of all of that, but also looking forward. And it was clear we needed to look to recovery and renewal and home in on that as never before, to really understand what we could most usefully and best do next for all of you as our members. The result, Shaping Our Futures Together, covers the period 2021 to 2024, and it's been very much developed in consultation with members and stakeholders, including a survey, meetings with many CEOs, and a survey of MSPs as well. And critically, our staff, our people who know the business best, but also know all of you very well as well. And all this told us that SFHA is very positively perceived as the collective voice which represents members' interests, a source of expert knowledge to do that with guidance and best practice, and a provider of learning and networking opportunities, bringing the sector together that no one organisation can do alone in the sector. When asked what was important now and in the coming years, there was real unanimity in what members were telling us, and overwhelmingly, you prioritised 3 main policy areas: delivering and managing affordable housing, not only new build but existing homes, tackling poverty and inequality, and tackling the climate change emergency and the transition to net zero carbon. Those were the 3 absolute priorities, and they will be our 3 priorities in the strategy. Interestingly, members drew out the interrelated nature and complexity of these policy areas, including potential implications for their individual businesses and their ability to achieve outcomes for tenants and communities. And everyone spoke of a greater emphasis on business resilience, really needing to put their heart and soul into that as we move on, customer experience, making that ever better, more meaningful, more open, transparent, and close, and operational delivery and efficiency, a real concern and priority around how you can all best do that in the challenging times we have ahead of us. And given those unprecedented and uncertain times, it's clearly crucial that our strategy remains flexible to respond to new challenges, opportunities and futures. And our updated purpose, vision, mission and values will guide our direction and how we work throughout the next period. So to be really kind of clear and precise about it, our purpose is to represent, support and connect our members. That's it. Very, very simple, much harder to do, obviously, but very simple to say and to remember. And our vision is that our members are central to Scotland's social and economic recovery and renewal, because it's everyone's right to live in a safe, warm, secure, affordable home in a thriving community. And our members are uniquely positioned to help the government and other key partners to achieve that. As the membership body and collective voice for housing associations and co-ops in Scotland, our mission is therefore to sustain and strengthen the impact our members can have on people and communities across Scotland. And of course, our people, SFHA, are fundamental to the successful delivery of the strategy, as are all the people who work in and for housing associations and co-ops, around over 12,000. And as such, we've updated our values as well to represent the sector, its tenants and communities, but also the people inside SFHA who work for the business and adhere and live those values every day. So while working at pace for and on behalf of our members, we intend to be professional, agile, collaborative and empathetic to the situation that everyone's in now and will be for months and years to come. And those values are shared by our board, and we know they're shared by you, our members and key partners. Our new strategy has 4 strategic themes, which really reflect our focus with members. The first is to enable change. Change is constant. It comes at us from the outside all the time, and it's also internal. We have to deal with it day to day. And SFHA can help with that in a way that no one organisation or group of organisations can do on their own. So we look to represent and help you do that as best we can. The second one is pursuing solutions. We need solutions, we need answers as never before, but we need them together. We won't find the big answers individually. So we need to come together to help each other provide those answers with and for the whole sector and its tenants and communities. We need to be future focused. That's the third one, anticipating social, economic, environmental and cultural change and growing sector leadership. So developing housing as a career of choice and a sector that young people want actively to come into. Developing the economy, generating and growing the economy, but also giving young people the chances and opportunities they need. And the fourth one is making sure that SFHA is a stable, agile organisation, which is financially strong and provides value for money for what the members pay. And we never take that for granted. That's absolutely at the heart of everything we do and all the decisions we make to help and support our membership. These themes capture several areas our members you highlighted, such as increased visibility of our work, to represent members' interests, doing more to address the differing needs between members. I talked about the diversity of the sector, which is great. It's also extremely challenging. Our our smallest member organisation has 15 homes. Our largest member organisation, Wheatley Group, has many tens of thousands, and there's everything in between. So to reflect that is a real task, but it's an absolutely essential one that we're always very, very focused on. And then greater transparency of reporting is something we want to get better at, so that we tell you more, you understand more, it's more clear what we do and why we do it, but also the reverse, that you can tell us more about what you want us to do, how and when, what and how, so that we can take that and build it into our priorities and our tasks and actions. New for this strategy, we're going to establish measures of success. We need to hold ourselves to account and hold ourselves to account on behalf of the sector. And these measures will provide indicators against which SFHA performance will be measured, monitored and reported during this strategy period. So an example of that would be that we'll establish a measure related to diversifying income, reinforcing the importance of SFHA's financial stability and efficiency based on an indicator around membership fees as a percentage of revenue. The impetus being to expand our revenue income streams so that we can manage membership fees more effectively and give you the best value for money at all times. We believe the new strategy positions us well to meet the challenges and opportunities of the coming years. And as we know, there are many. These are just a few of them. We know we need to continue to support landlords, members through the recovery from COVID, which is going to be with us for many months, if not years to come. We know we have to work hard with government to make sure we have the right levels of financial investment for the new supply of housing, but also for existing homes. Really critical that we get those two together and in balance. And I'm hoping to hear more from the Cabinet Secretary later about that. The pandemic made existing levels of inequality worse, as well as making them more visible. And we know that everyone needs a warm, safe, secure, affordable home with space to work and play. And those who had that fared much better than those who didn't. So social housing is a vital tool to tackle poverty and inequality, and we need to make sure it fulfills its broadest and deepest potential to do this. And we'll be working with all of you to achieve that breadth and depth that, as we always have done, but we need to do even more of as we go forward. The rented sector strategy will create a shared definition of affordability, which will help our members during rent setting cycles and to keep rents truly affordable. The enormous challenge of net zero carbon, which we explored in the recent ZEST report, must be met in a way that doesn't require social landlords and their tenants to carry more than their fair share of the load financially, particularly for tenants. We don't want to drive fuel poverty, and we don't want to increase rent poverty at the expense of net zero carbon. And of course, we'll be doing what we can to broaden and deepen our work in all respects so that the social and economic impacts of social housing are more widely acknowledged and, even more importantly, are more widely felt and seen in terms of health, work and welfare, community placemaking, digital inclusion, community empowerment, and ultimately as a central plank in achieving social justice and equality in our country. This means not only being closely involved in Housing to 2040, but also the holistic and system-wide recommendations in the report of the Social Renewal Advisory Board, which reported earlier this calendar year. If not now, when is the name of the report. And I would urge you to read it if you haven't already. It situates social housing within a much broader and deeper social and economic framework, which is exactly where we need to be. And so to finish, lots of work to do in the coming years, and we believe we can only do this by shaping our futures together, which is why we've called our strategy that, working ever more closely with you, our members, and on your behalf, with government, with the regulator and other stakeholders. So housing associations and co-ops can really play their part in shaping the future of Scotland, its people and communities. So I'm delighted now to introduce Shona Robertson, the Cabinet Secretary for Social Justice, Housing and Local Government. As many of you will know, Shona is the MSP for Dundee City East, having first been elected as a List MP in 1999. Shona has also served in the Scottish Government as both a Minister and Cabinet Secretary for Health and Sport. The depth and breadth of the brief she's got is hugely challenging, but also provides huge opportunities to work across portfolios to ensure social housing providers have the means to deliver on that broader and deeper social purpose I talked about earlier. Not only giving people great homes in great places, but tackling poverty, ending homelessness, and achieving net zero carbon and building successful and sustainable communities. And I know she's got the ambition to do this personally, and also as a key part of the government. So I'm really looking forward to working with the Cabinet Secretary to see those ambitions achieved, shaping the future through the lens of social justice and equality, so that we continue building a country which is collaborative, creative, resilient and compassionate, and where everyone has the high quality, warm, safe and affordable home in a successful place that they need and deserve. So that's everything from me for now, and I'm delighted to hand over to Cabinet Secretary Shona Robertson.
Thank you so much, Sally, and I very much look forward to working with you and your colleagues, and thanks for the invitation to take part in this meeting today. I've already had the opportunity to meet with you, Sally, since I took up the new role, and going forward I'm looking forward to our regular engagement as part of ensuring that the voice of the sector and tenants is heard. And let me just begin by echoing something you said in your remarks, that the role of the sector has become even more important and challenging. And I want to start with a big thank you to all of you for your efforts, particularly over the last 18 months, which I know has been really, really tough indeed. It's also good today for me to have the opportunity to hear directly from SFHA members, although we need to proceed with caution as we navigate the next phase of the pandemic. I really do look forward to being able to visit your organisations, your projects, to meet with tenants around the country once this can be safely restarted. I think to deliver real change needs a shared ambition and a shared effort, and the ability of the social housing sector to come together and deliver change and improvement is really evident from the progress made in the past, and now the vision set out in Housing to 2040 really sets out the challenges for the next phase in achieving our shared ambition. And this long-term collective vision for our homes and communities was shaped by our partners and demands that our decisions now and into the future put people and communities first. And when I came into post, it was one of the first documents I turned to and read it in detail, as you would expect. And what struck me was that it takes a longer term approach and route map to housing, and that's important because sometimes we can get tied up with 5-year parliamentary term focuses, but with housing it needed that longer term vision, and Housing to 2040 is an incredibly impressive document and really keeps us focused on what we have to do, not just over the coming year or 5 years, but over that longer term vision, and that's important. I welcome the Shaping Our Futures Together strategy and really commend the way that SFHA have set out their priorities and approach, and of course it aligns with our focus on Housing to 2040 while exploring how best to provide support for members and their tenants, encouraging a push to see housing as a career and recognising the value of social landlords as anchors in the community. We're all striving to create a more successful Scotland with opportunities for everyone to flourish through increased well-being and sustainable and inclusive economic growth, whether that's through tackling poverty and inequality, ensuring we meet our energy efficiency, decarbonisation and fuel poverty targets, and of course tackle the climate emergency, or by making sure we have connected, cohesive communities to live in. I absolutely realise the challenge in all of these ambitions and also recognise that the impact of COVID over the last 18 months has been and will continue to be significant. Through the work of the Social Housing Resilience Group, which SFHA was central in establishing, the social housing sector has demonstrated how it was able to come together to adapt and work differently to focus on providing essential services to some of our most vulnerable communities. And that same spirit and partnership will be needed as we navigate our way out of the pandemic and focus on our long-term housing strategy. Without a doubt, the pandemic shone a spotlight on the persistent inequalities that exist in Scotland, despite all of our best efforts, and showed that so much was easier if you had a secure home and access to good quality outdoor green space. Housing will therefore be pivotal to our recovery from the pandemic, and through Housing to 2040 we have an opportunity to ensure that our actions as we rebuild and renew are guided by the principles of social justice, equality and human rights. And although Sally was right in mentioning the breadth and size of my portfolio, it does create opportunities across my portfolio to bring all of that work together, but also we need to do that across the whole of government. We don't have the time and space for any silos. We need to work across the whole of government in making sure that we deliver and tackle the inequalities that still exist in our society. And as this is a strategy for the longer term, we will of course be phasing our activity over the years ahead. For now, let me set out just some of our current actions. Our new rented sector strategy has been an early area of focus, and work has started with a range of conversations with tenants and stakeholders. And the strategy will aim to give tenants more secure, stable, affordable tenancies with improved standards of accommodation, new controls on rent and more flexibility to personalise homes. The agreement with the Scottish Greens reflects our ambitions here. The supply of affordable homes is crucial to make that strategy work. Since 2007, the Scottish Government has supported the delivery of over 102,000 affordable homes, and Housing to 2040 continued this commitment with an ambition to support the delivery of 100,000 affordable homes, with at least 70% of these being for social rent, once the previous 50,000 homes target has been delivered. Now, this ambition has been enhanced by the recent cooperation agreement we've signed with the Scottish Greens, with an increased target of 110,000 affordable homes by 2032, with 10% of these to be in our remote, rural and island communities, further reinforcing the importance we place on the role of affordable housing. It also includes a commitment to develop a remote, rural and islands housing action plan to ensure that we meet the housing needs of those areas and to help retain people and attract people to those communities. This new plan will be backed by at least £45 million as part of our overall affordable housing supply programme funding over this Parliament. Many of our ambitions in Housing to 2040 will bring benefits to rural and island communities, including the continuation of the Rural and Island Housing Fund, managing short-term lets and second homes, tackling empty homes, and of course growth in self-provided housing. And I'm aware that many of you will be waiting to hear the outcome of the review of affordable housing investment benchmarks. The report on the review is now being considered by COSLA, and I wish to consider their feedback before making a final decision. That said, I'd like to take this opportunity to reassure you that benchmarks are not grant rates or indeed grant ceilings. They are simply an administrative tool which is used for grant assessment purposes to determine the level of scrutiny that a project receives. With this in mind, applications for grants should continue to be submitted as normal in advance of any changes to the benchmarks, and to ensure the continued momentum in the delivery of affordable homes. The importance of the number of affordable homes we all deliver is not just in the number of homes themselves, but in the range of households, communities and the needs that they support. And of course, we're committed to delivering housing that is fit for purpose now and into the future. We've recently commenced a review of the Housing for Varying Needs Design Guide, which, although still at a very, very good standard, is over 20 years old. And we anticipate that the review will take up to 2 years to complete, and wish to work closely with the sector during this process. We're also currently undertaking a review of the adaptations arrangements, and through this work we'll develop recommendations to improve the adaptations system so that it will be capable of dealing with increased demand. Stakeholders told us clearly that a right to an adequate home should be central to Housing to 2040, and we agree with that and are taking action towards realising that right in Scotland. The right to housing is already a human right enshrined in international law, and Scotland currently has some of the strongest rights in the world for people experiencing homelessness. We're investing £37.5 million to support councils to prioritise settled accommodation for all through the implementation of the rapid rehousing transition plans and the upscaling of Housing First for those facing the most challenges. Although we've taken positive action, we know that we need to do more. Housing to 2040 must and will underpin positive housing outcomes for everyone as a core feature of achieving a fairer Scotland. We'll undertake a comprehensive audit of our current housing and homelessness legislation to help us assess how well it protects marginalised groups and people with protected characteristics. We'll also work with stakeholders to develop a shared understanding of affordability that takes into account the drivers of poverty and inequality, the economic challenges of the housing market, the financial sustainability of the affordable rented sector, and the real costs of living. And of course, with Glasgow hosting COP26 in the autumn, we can't ignore how housing can contribute more widely to our climate reduction targets. And that's why it's also great to see Scottish Housing Day on the 15th of September focusing on the climate emergency. And the recent publication, very recent indeed, of the recommendations of ZEST, which your own Sally Thomas co-chaired, well done again Sally for that, sets out the issues that we need to grapple with very clearly. Now, we want to deliver homes that are warm and affordable to heat, while reducing the emissions caused by housing and housing construction to not only meet climate reduction targets, but also to achieve our statutory fuel poverty targets. And getting this right represents one of the greatest challenges before us, as Sally outlined in her remarks. But of course, there are real opportunities too. As you know, we're leading by example with our aim for all new homes delivered by RSLs and local authorities, not just to have zero direct emissions heating, but to be net zero direct emissions homes by 2026. And that's a big piece of work. We're already working with stakeholders to deliver this through the development of the zero emissions new build affordable homes strategy. But we can't just make our new homes energy efficient. We face a significant challenge to reduce the emissions created by existing homes. Alongside widespread use of fossil fuel heating systems, many homes have poor energy efficiency and are too expensive to heat. And that's why ZEST was set up to consider and provide practical recommendations on what is required to achieve our ambitious climate change targets. We appreciate the commitment to leading change shown by the social housing sector and the work done by ZEST, and their report emphasises the scale of the challenge in getting to net zero heating. And we'll be considering those recommendations closely and responding in due course. Our work to decarbonise our homes offers opportunities to modernise construction, particularly off-site construction, which is one of the most important tools we have to achieve the quality of home build and exacting energy efficiency standards needed to meet our net zero targets. Modernising the house building industry will not only support net zero, but also bring benefits of a more diverse workforce, more digitisation, speedier development, greater benefits for communities, and improved health and safety. Our draft heat in building strategy set out a clear set of actions to transform Scotland's building stock over the next 24 years. Now, these actions will play a key role in meeting emissions targets and removing poor energy efficiency as a driver of fuel poverty. We've stepped up our investment over the next 5 years, allocating at least £1.8 billion to support the accelerated deployment of heat and energy efficiency measures in homes and buildings across Scotland. This investment will help to cut emissions, it'll help to create jobs, strengthen supply chains and support those in fuel poverty through the heat decarbonisation transition. And I'll be working with Michael Matheson, the Cabinet Secretary for Net Zero Energy and Transport, to ensure that we do all we can to support a just transition as we decarbonise housing across Scotland, because Sally made the point that we can't do this while also making it more difficult to tackle fuel poverty or indeed putting rents up. So we'll be very clear about that as well. And I want to conclude my remarks with a focus on poverty. We invest around £2 billion each year in support for people on low incomes, including over £672 million targeted at children. But we have to do more. And that's why we committed to a wide range of ambitious action to be delivered in the first 100 days of this government, maintaining the pace of action taken through the COVID pandemic. Tackling poverty and inequality is an absolute priority across all ministerial portfolios and needs all parts of government and broader society really to work together towards poverty reduction, increasing household incomes from work, reducing costs on essentials and maximising incomes from social security. Backed by over £1 billion of additional funding, our response to the pandemic shows that we can make change happen at the pace and scale required to support people and improve their lives, and we want to build on that. We delivered free school meal support during all school holidays and periods of remote learning for children from low-income families, helping to tackle food insecurity. And we'll continue this while expanding free school meal support to all primary pupils. And through 2 pandemic support payments of £100 to low-income families with children, we put money into the pockets of those who needed it most. Building upon this approach, we'll effectively pay the Scottish Child Payment through introducing bridging payments of £520 for families not yet eligible for the payment. And we're also providing £130 to every household who received the council tax reduction in April, reaching around 500,000 households. The eradication of poverty and building a fairer, more equal country is a national mission for government, for Parliament and society as a whole. So I hope that what I've said today gives you a flavour of the breadth of activity currently taking place as we begin to deliver on Housing to 2040 actions and commitments. Importantly, we need to be able to measure progress against these actions and commitments, and we're currently considering a governance process and monitoring framework for Housing to 2040. This will be established later this year and will ensure that we and others can assess progress towards our vision and, importantly, be held accountable for that. And speaking of accountability, I'll draw my remarks to a close now, and I very much look forward to hearing what questions you have that you want to raise with me today. I look forward to our discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cabinet Secretary. I think there's a huge range of issues that have been covered there, so plenty for us to talk about. So thank you very much for taking the time to speak to us, and thank you also to Sally for taking us through our strategy. So we have a good 20 minutes for questions if we need them, so lots of time to have a chat. There are questions starting to come in via the chat facility, which is fantastic, and I would encourage you to do pop your questions there if you have them. And remember to indicate whether you would like to ask your question yourself or if you just want me to put it for you. I'm going to start with a question that I think might be on quite a number of people's minds, given what's been in the media over the last week. We've obviously recently seen the partnership agreement between the Greens and the Scottish Government, and Cabinet Secretary, you referenced it in terms of the increase to the target for affordable homes. I wonder if I could ask both of you to reflect on what changes we should expect to see to the housing agenda in light of this. I wonder, Sally, would you like to kick off with your thoughts?
Yes, no, you're right. I mean, this week has been a hive of activity, and I suspect will continue to be for some weeks to come as things settle in and embed. We're looking forward, obviously, to working with the government in whatever capacity or whatever nature that means. And we do feel that, as I've said in my remarks, and Shona Robertson said in hers, that collaboration, connection, and working across and deeply and broadly is some of the core principles in which I think many of us, most of us as a country, want to work, certainly in our professional capacities and personally as well. So bringing more people into the tent, more interest into the tent, I think can only be a good thing, irrespective of political colours or policies or the nature of those. The more we can get done together, the better. I think in terms of the cooperation agreement as it's set out, there are some things that we welcome, obviously, the increased funding for energy efficiency and net zero carbon, the increase in the affordable home supply. There are a few things that we're more cautious about and we want to explore and to discuss and debate on. One is rent control. Clearly that rent control in the private rented sector is a very different thing to rent control in the social housing sector, and we're very, very fortunate in Scotland that we have a system of rent setting which is properly accountable and transparent, but it's locally led and set, and I think by individual housing associations and co-ops against benchmarks. And I think that's really important. I worked in England when the Conservative government several years ago, 5, 6, 7 years ago, intervened in the rented sector, in the social housing rented sector and rent setting, and it was a disaster. There are all kinds of reasons for that, which we won't go into here. But I would be very, very cautious about anything of that nature replicating itself in our country unnecessarily and inadvertently, and with unintended consequences. So lots to welcome, lots to talk through, but an absolute willingness to have those conversations, whether they're easy, difficult, or something in between, and to find that shared agenda and that shared way forward that we all need.
can I just start by echoing what Sally has said? I think just on the kind of tone of the agreement, you know, I think the public like their politicians to work together. I think they're really put off by some of the kind of yaboo disagreements for the sake of disagreeing. Now, you know, what we have here in the agreement might be groundbreaking for, you know, Scotland or the UK, but it's actually quite normal across most of Europe, where parties, because of their electoral systems, come together regularly and you know, forge agreements based on areas of cooperation. So, you know, it's not an unusual thing in many parts of the world. So. Yeah, I think in terms of what the kind of practicalities, well, we obviously will have a minister who will have tenant rights in his title, which is a first. We think the agreement will help us to make further progress to achieve housing to 2040. Obviously, as I touched on in my remarks, the increase, the 10% increase in the delivery of affordable homes, with a particular focus on remote and rural Scotland, is important. The rental sector strategy and the commitment to consult on that, and then any legislative requirements for change will emerge in a housing bill that will follow that. And let me just say this: you know, there will be full consultation on all aspects of this. The rent control issue that that Sally mentioned, you know, the focus has been particularly on the private sector, where their rent affordability has been raised as an issue in many parts of Scotland. Now, we want to take that forward again with full consultation, including with the private sector, the private rented sector. We need to make sure that whatever the system, there's enough local flexibility, because not all areas are the same in Scotland, and what would work in one area may not work in another. And let me just reassure Sally, I think we would be very loath to pick up and follow any policy initiatives that have been led by the UK government. So let me reassure you on that. We will forge our own policies here that are suitable for the needs of Scotland. Your sector is crucial in taking that forward. Just finally, on the energy efficiency, I touched on this again in my speech there. That is obviously a big part of the agreement. You wouldn't expect anything else, given the, you know, the Greens priorities here, but that actually were our priorities as well, and we'd already set out the need for the decarbonisation of housing and indeed transport, and that is going to be the big story, I think, over the next few years, and certainly of this Parliament, is getting on the how do we do that. And you know, that is going to be a really big task, but also an exciting opportunity.
Thank you both very much for those reflections. I think clearly going to be an emerging picture as we move on. So we'll look forward to learning more about that. We've got a couple of questions in the chat. So I am going to pass to Sean Connor, who has a question that rather neatly brings together the Cabinet Secretary's current role and your previous role as CabSec for Health and Wellbeing. So well done, Sean. I'll hand over to you.
Thank you. Could I ask, obviously the homes and communities that we live in play an important influence and on our health and well-being. How as a sector can we reconnect with public health and housing to improve health and reduce inequalities, particularly at a local level?
Sorry,
Cabinet Secretary, might you like to start on that?
Yeah, well, huge question, and I hope I gave a bit of a sense of that in my remarks when I said that, you know, tackling poverty and inequalities isn't just my job. It's the job of, it's the job of all of us, but in government, it's the job of the whole of government. So the work that we're taking forward, that I've asked every single Cabinet Secretary, including those within the health portfolio, to look at what more can we do as a cross-government effort, and also working with local government and our partners in COSLA. And we've signed an agreement with COSLA that went to leaders about how we can work closer together on the recovery phase from COVID. And we also know that access to a secure, affordable, warm home is a public health step. It's a public health intervention. And we know that the lack of that impacts on public health, it impacts on physical and mental health. And that's actually been, if you like, crystallised even further during the pandemic. And again, hopefully I gave you a flavour of that in my speech. So as we move forward, we need to make sure that across government, we are joining the dots. We're looking at how we can use housing as the kind of driver for the recovery from COVID. It sits at the heart because it does so much more than just give people somewhere to live. It's so much more than bricks and mortar. It is about that improvement in the health and well-being of individuals, families and communities. So hopefully I gave you a sense of that in my speech. And you know, the response from my cabinet colleagues has been really, really positive. I'm working through their responses at the moment in terms of what more they can do to tackle poverty and child poverty in particular. And I think that, you know, we will at the end of that have a really good comprehensive chance to take a step change there, and that's something that I'm determined to do.
Sally, would you like to add thoughts on that?
I'll just keep it brief so we can get in some more questions. I mean, you know, following on from what the Cabinet Secretary said, I completely agree that I think from my point of view there are two overarching aspects to this. One is government leadership, and you know, as started by the last administration, there is an even greater emphasis in this one on that cross-portfolio, broad and deep working, and trying to break down you know, long existing, now old-fashioned and outdated silos, not just in government, but generally in all of our professional lives. So leadership from government and the demonstration of that visibly and practically is going to be hugely important. The second thing is, as I think, is for the sector to consider. You know, we as a sector do huge amounts of work on poverty and inequality, particularly health poverty and inequality, which I think the focus of your question, Sean. And we've worked for many years to try and, you know, break down those barriers between housing and health. I think it is happening. It's slow, much slower than we'd all have want, we'd want it, but it is happening slowly and certainly. And I think from my point of view, the sector could usefully do a couple of things that it already does, but do more of, and that is to provide more evidence of how housing does intervene, does enhance, does deal and address with health inequalities, and to do that through qualitative evidence, you know, case studies, stories, facts, opinions and views, but also quantitative facts and figures, data, statistics, which should demonstrate the difference that adaptations can make, which demonstrate the difference that coming out of hospital into a safe, warm, secure home can make, that demonstrate the difference keeping people in their homes rather than going into hospital can make. And I think, and we have done quite a lot of that, but I think we could do a lot more, both as individual members, but also collecting that overall as a sector.
Thank you very much, both of you, and thank you, Sean, for a very good question. Questions are coming in thick and fast now, so we'll try and get through as many as we can in the just less than 10 minutes we have left. We have a question from Martin Wilkie McFarlane, who is happy for me to put his question. Martin is from Wellhouse Housing Association and, of course, is on SFHA's board representing the Glasgow constituency. His question is, we have a huge collective task to take on for our poorer communities. How can we best address this beyond the bricks and mortar? And I'll open that up for either of you that would like to come in first.
I'll just say something very, very brief, because I think people want to hear more from the Cabinet Secretary than me. So I will try and keep my remarks really brief in the time we've got left. For me, there are two issues here to try and keep it simple and short. One is resources and funding, and we all know and we all accept that we need, and as the Cabinet Secretary talked about this, we need the people, the money, the supporting kind to be able to support our poorer communities. But the other point I'm going to make is a more is a less tangible one, and it's about empowerment. It's about how we can do more to shift power into the hands of our communities, not just work in a way, not just work with them on an equal balance of power, but actually give them more power than we've got as professionals to sort out, to work out how best they want to address their problems, and also with the resources to do that. So for me, it's cultural, it's about attitudes and behaviour, it's about empowerment, but of course it's also about the tangibility and practicality of resources and people.
Yeah, I would agree with Sally. We touched on some of this earlier, that you know, housing is a good quality housing is a driver for the regeneration of communities, and I see that in my home city of Dundee, the way that, you know, good quality housing has really transformed areas that were blighted, and alongside that are you know, facilities. So it's not just about homes, it's having the facilities. I really like the 20-minute neighbourhood concept, where people are able to have the facilities and services on their doorstep. But also, you know, one of the key pillars of tackling poverty is employability and job opportunities, as well as driving down costs and keeping rents affordable, and of course the supports that we put in place. I touched on some of them, and the work that's done through Social Security Scotland. So, you know, all of that is going to be really important. And just one other thought as well, that we talk a lot about the priority families that have been identified by the Scottish Government around those who are the most vulnerable with the biggest needs. And I want to shorten the lines of communication between government and those priority families, because Sally makes a good point about empowerment. And sometimes we get into the habit of doing things to people because we think that's the right thing. Actually, when you ask families sometimes, what is it that would make the biggest difference to you and your family in terms of helping you from where you are now to where you want to be? Some of those answers are a bit more surprising and perhaps not what we all assumed. And we need to listen more, I think, to families in terms of what they're telling us, and then look at the kind of bespoke support to help families move forward. And we know who the families are, and as a sector you can help us do that by shortening those lines of communication. So that's something I'm really keen to do, so that we, you know, we support families by listening to what it is they want and need.
Thank you both for those reflections. I think another huge area there, and so much to do, but it's clear that there's so much ambition, so that's great to hear. We've got several more questions that have turned up since I last looked, but I think we are into our last few minutes, so I'm going to go with one from Lorna Wilson, who's from Barhead Housing Association, who says she's happy for me to put her question. Quite a big question and very topical given the CEST report that came out yesterday. Lorna asks, can you share your current thinking on practical ways in which social landlords, SFHA and government will work together to understand investment needs and develop scalable solutions to deliver the zero carbon requirements in our existing homes? Cabinet Secretary, I wonder if I could start with you on that.
Sorry, there's always a point where you forget to unmute. Yes, well, look, hugely important. I spent a bit of time in my speech talking about that because it is so important. I think the first thing to say is Sally hit the nail on the head, that taking this forward, and there's a lot of information from the ZEST recommendations that Michael and I need to absorb. We need to then turn that into kind of bite-sized pieces that are not overwhelming to either government or the sector in terms of how you take that forward. Principles also, we need to make sure that the way we do it and what we do doesn't adversely impact on the affordability of rents and indeed the affordability of fuel. We don't want to have an adverse impact on fuel poverty. So we need to work through all of that in terms of how do we do it? What do we do? The priorities for taking that forward. We won't be able to do everything all at the same time. So we need to boil that down into a sort of route map of sequencing of actions that we will take. And we might want to test some of that out as well. But anything we do, we need to make sure is scalable in order to do this. It is a huge task. On the opportunity side, though, I think it has got the ability to create hugely important employment opportunities, potentially for a whole new generation of young people. And if we get this right, that can also in turn help to resolve some of the issues that we've also been talking about today in terms of those young people who have perhaps not had the opportunities in life to date. So we need to do all of that. So, you know, Michael and I will be working through the detail with yourselves. We'll be coming up with a plan that takes it forward in a way that doesn't overwhelm the sector.
Thank you, Cabinet Secretary. Sally, very briefly.
Just very briefly, yes, one thought really. I know that on a very practical level, a lot of members are struggling with the gas boiler issue. Do I put in a gas boiler? Do I replace a gas boiler? What's the point? 'Cause it's going to come out in a year or two. If I don't, though, what else do I do? Because the technologies are not yet proven, and some of them don't work in certain places. So really difficult immediate problems, and I don't have all the answers to that. I wish I did, but I don't. And we'll be working with the Cabinet Secretary to find those answers in as quickly as we can. The one thing I would say is fabric first. Look after and improve the fabric of the homes as far as you possibly can to make them as warm and energy efficient as they possibly can be now and into the next kind of few months and maybe even year or so, while we do try and work on the net zero carbon actions that have to come on the back of that. So that would be the message I'd give if I'm trying to be as practical as possible.
Thank you both very much. I'm afraid that is all the time we have for questions. We had a couple of questions that we didn't get to about supply chain issues and about the governance of Housing to 2040. I'm going to suggest that maybe some of the SFHA policy team might be able to pick up with the people who've asked those questions, and we'll perhaps liaise with officials if need be to get some responses. So I want to thank you all very much. Thank you in particular to our two speakers, to Sally and to the Cabinet Secretary. Very much appreciate your time. Just a reminder that this event will be on the YouTube channel, the SFHA YouTube channel, so you can watch again if you would like to. You can share it with your friends. If you want to keep up with our events and our training programme, SFHA always has things going on, so we really encourage you to subscribe to the events bulletin. You can do that in the email you'll receive after this event. And we have some big events coming up. We have our energy conference on the 21st of September. We'll have our AGM and the launch of our annual report on the 22nd, so lots going on. Remember as well that SFHA does run a lot of Teams channels for members where you can chat to other housing associations about particular issues, including many of those that we talked about today, so do sign up to those. We always want your feedback on these kind of events, so there will be an evaluation form popping up in the chat. I think right about now it will also come out to you via email, so please do fill that in. It really helps us to provide the events that you want to hear from us. So we'd love you to do that. And it only remains for me to once again say thank you to the Cabinet Secretary and to her team for joining us and for working with us on this event today. Thank you to Sally and to the SFHA team who put this together. I know we're not in real life, but it still does take a lot of work to put together these virtual events. So thank you to everyone who was involved. Thank you so much to everyone for joining us. So many of you joined us and that was fantastic. And we look forward to welcoming you to another SFHA event again very soon. Thank you all and have a lovely day.
Thank you for the invitation and your questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Cabinet Secretary. Bye.